Let's be clear, though, the Alpha Tauri is not the same machine as the RB19. And both drivers for Alpha Tauri, Nick DeVries being one, have struggled in that car this season. So what kind of risk is this, Nate, for Daniel Ricciardo to step into this car? Or is it not so much as what do you give us this season, but what the future will hold? As you said, that they want to be much closer to the Alpha Tauri and Red Bull teams in 2024.
Yeah, I think it is a big risk because, as I said, I think Ricciardo really wanted to go in 24. And the reason you don't want to go in now is exactly the reasons you said, Katie. This car, Tsunoda's only got 2 points. Everyone's acting as if De Vries was massively behind. And if you take the most recent example of Ricciardo, when Zach Brown made that call, I mean, Lando was so much further ahead than Ricciardo. That was a case where it was literally apples and oranges that you could compare. Lando was getting, an oranges. I don't know which of the two is orange, because obviously that's McLaren's color.
But orange.
Yeah. One of them was different colored oranges. I don't know. I've got myself into a weird hole here. I don't know what I'm talking about. But in that situation, Ricciardo was performing so much worse than his teammate if you compare it to where De Vries was with Tsunoda. So I think it's a real risk, and there's a few reasons why it's a risk for Ricciardo. The first of which being that I think a full season with a improved Alpha Tauri, whatever they're going to be called next year, is a much better proposition than this is. He's jumping in. It's so difficult to look good in a bad team, and weirdly, I think this is a perfect scenario for Red Bull. Really, it's a perfect scenario for Red Bull, and it's probably it's good for Ricciardo, but I don't think it's as good as it would have been had he come back next year. The reason I say that is because I think if Ricciardo's decent, if Ricciardo competes at the level we think he's going to, but he's not spectacular, at the very least, Red Bull get a good read on Yuki Tsunoda. They're probably, even though they had Pierre Gasly there, who's a race winner, it's pretty clear that Christian Horner and Helmut Marko both really, for whatever reason, soured on him when he went through that Red Bull experience, and they never promoted him again. So at the very least, they're going to come out of it and say, we know how good Tsunoda is here. And their best case scenario is he does amazingly, and it puts a lot of pressure onto Perez, and you would expect that Perez makes a step forward. That's obviously what they're hoping for, and we can get more into what it means for Perez, I guess, in a little bit. But if you're Ricciardo, I think that it clearly was Alpha Tauri or bust for him. There was no way he was going to go straight to Red Bull. So it's a risk he's going to have to take. And I think that he clearly backs himself to do better than he did at McLaren. So I don't know. That's what I've been trying to mull over in my head, is how big of a risk this is. But really, I think if we're brutally honest about it, I don't think Ricciardo was going to drive anywhere else anytime soon. So you'd rather take on a situation that's risky than be in the situation he was in. So I actually think that he's done the right thing. If it was now or never, even if it is risky, I don't think he's going to have another chance like this. Certainly not with Red Bull now so clearly as his end goal. If he hadn't said that, other teams might have been willing to give him a shot. But I think now he's said that, other teams are like, well, clearly you just want to get back to Red Bull, which is fair. Like who wouldn't want to drive for them right now? But he's kind of nailed his kind of position to the master bit.
Quick follow-up.
I think it would have been, sorry, Kate, I just say on that, I think it would have been a much bigger risk not to take this drive. Because,
agreed.
Red Bull clearly had, well, Marko certainly had come to the end of his tether with De Vries and the results he was getting. Liam Lawson is also available, doing a pretty good job in Super Formula. He didn't really impress in F2 during his 2 seasons in it, but Liam Lawson, who's the next in line in the Red Bull Junior program, is second in the Super Formula Championship. I think Red Bull would like to see him go and win that in total. But of course, if you would say to Liam Lawson, what would you rather do, finish your Super Formula Championship or jump in an Alpha Tauri? He'd jump in an Alpha Tauri. So Daniel, I think, had to take it from that point. If he had just said, "Oh no, give it to Liam," then I think he'd probably write off next year as well. So I don't think he had any choice, and much bigger risk to turn around and say no at this stage.
And also, there's been rumors, obviously, before De Vries, they wanted Herta was the guy that was in there. But if you look at IndyCar right now, the guy leading the championship is Alex Palou, and I think there's definitely been some interest there from the Red Bull side. So if you are Ricciardo, obviously you're lucky this year that the IndyCar season kind of runs until about September, October time. But if they sign Palou in the off season or before next season, it's the same situation. You've kind of, the door's slammed in your face. So I really think he had to do it. There was no other way.
Was there discussions about Daniel Ricciardo taking the AlphaTauri seat at the end of 2022, or was that option not an availability for him?
From my understanding, it was not fully on the cards, but I think that they'd have been stupid to have taken the Red Bull thing and not asked, right? Sorry, Laurence, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I agree. I think Daniel had made his position clear that he didn't intend to race in 2023. And he made that quite clear relatively early on, long before Nick de Vries got signed up. And when we were in the Dutch Grand Prix, and because basically this all started because Fernando Alonso decided that he was going to leave Alpine and go to Aston Martin. Which, I mean, who else would be at the bottom of all this? And then, that meant that Pierre Gasly had this option to go to Alpine, and Alpine became very set on Pierre over Daniel. Because I think Daniel may have entertained the idea of going to Alpine, but Alpine, who felt like they kind of been burnt by Daniel before when they were Renault, and he left to go to McLaren. They were very much set on Pierre. So once it became clear that Pierre, wanted to leave and Red Bull were open to the idea of ending his contract a year earlier and letting him go, the original idea was Colton Herta. Super license points didn't look like they were going to come together, didn't ultimately come together. And so they then had to start looking around. And really, Nick de Vries, it was great timing on his behalf. Again, random thing, but Alex Albon's appendix burst, and that's what got de Vries the shot at Monza, and he really did take that. And I think that really absolutely was the thing that got him into that drive. If Daniel had been a serious contender at that point, and had been willing to take the drive of AlphaTauri, then I think AlphaTauri would have absolutely taken him. But Daniel at that stage, I think, was so bruised by his experience at McLaren that the thought of then going to a team that was further down the grid, and ultimately this year has been further down the grid, was just, it just didn't appeal compared to a year off, assessing options and coming back. And I think, if we look at it now, I think that probably was the right decision. One, because he's got into that car anyway, but two, I think he's really benefited from that time off and really put it all in perspective about what he wants and what F1 means to him.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.